Namanda, Samanda, 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 Samanda. Ngangon chosengan hishima jodol shingan fumanzok seifu joshongak ngao muryoko fui dai seishu 不再小兵具政府上昇学が市場分の妙小長寺法空境未所門政府上昇学利欲人少年上映主本業真無無浄土一生天人師人力現代公不生無才道少女三苦妙交際主役難回避地縁縁名詞根門案閉塞小悪道通達前主門高僧上満足意よろじ法日願主樹期天候不言一種解放像五世苦毒法上大集中説法四四苦供養一切仏具足種特本願念心上満得意三愛用女分無下地通達未不詳願学営力投資最小損心安や効果大仙を感動国書天人東地妙見ナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブ願にしく毒平等性際道本菩大心往生 Namanda, 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 Namanda. Please join me in Gasho. As the great king heard these words, terror gripped his heart, and a shudder ran through his body. He trembled in his 5 parts like a plantain tree. Gazing upward, he replied, "Who is it? There is no form, only the voice." "Great king, it is your father, Bimbisara. Let Jivaka's advice be heeded. Do not follow the words of the 6 ministers. Their views are wrong." Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Nam Mandabs, Nam Mandabs, Nam Mandabs, Nam. Good morning, everyone. I really look forward to the day that when I say good morning, everyone, I hear a huge crowd of people in the Hondo say good morning back. It'll be very nice to hear voices once again in the Hondo and chanting other than my own. It will be a wonderful feeling. It'll probably jar me a little bit too. But once again, good morning and happy Father's Day to all of the wonderful fathers of our Sangha and the community. I wanted to talk about the subject of fathers today for obvious reasons. So one of the big things about fathers or subjects about parents in Buddhism is that there is this sort of interesting idea. On some level, when we talk about Buddhist monks, right, all going out into the the monastery and almost as a form of renunciation, there isn't this. There is this weird, or not weird, but there is this, I think, false understanding that okay, I totally discard my father. I don't care about my father anymore, and there is this sort of idea that we as Buddhists have these, our ultimate goal is to be unattached to the people we love, like our fathers and our mothers. And I think this is incorrect. And especially in Jodo Shinshu, we really do have a deep connection to fathers. In Japan, the system is still very patriarchal. Whether that's right or wrong, it's still very patriarchal. So many of my friends at Chuo Bukkyo Gakuin or Chubutsu were ministers, were training to become ministers, mainly because their father was a minister, and their father was a minister, and their father was a minister, and their father was a minister. Last weekend, we had our June seminar with Reverend Hibiki Murakami, and he said, I believe that he's the 13th generation Jodo Shinshu minister. So that means 13 fathers ago, that's when that tradition started for his family. So we in the Jodo Shinshu tradition of Buddhism have a very deep connection with fathers and patriarchal figures. But in this tradition, or in Jodo Shinshu in particular, I wanted to talk about a couple of characters in almost what I'd like to call a period piece drama. So like when you hear or when you see, go to movies or you watch shows like Game of Thrones or Braveheart, you see those stories, those epic stories where you have those powerful king fathers. Okay, and like the son or the daughter has to live up to their father's reputation. Disney movies too, right? Just like The Lion King. Simba has to live up to his father's expectations and reputation. In our tradition of Jodo Shinshu, Remember, Dharma School kids? We have 3 Pure Land Sutras, okay? Once again, 3 Pure Land Sutras. And the 3 Pure Land Sutras are the largest sutra, which is where we mostly base our teachings off of, since that's what Shinran Shonin said. But then we have the 2 other sutras, and that's the Amida Sutra, the smaller sutra, and then there is the Contemplation Sutra. And we don't talk about the Contemplation Sutra all that much, so I'd like to talk a little bit about it right now. So in this story of the Contemplation Sutra, we have a king named Bimbisara, King Bimbisara. Okay, and with King Bimbisara, he has a queen, Vaidehi, and together they have a son named Ajatashatru. Okay, can you Dharma School kids say that for me? Ajatashatru. It's kind of a hard name, but I want you to remember these characters' names. Okay, so the father is Bimbisara, the queen is Queen Vaidehi, and the son is Ajatashatru, or Prince Ajatashatru. So in this story, it's not a very happy one. Even before the Contemplation Sutra happens, King Bimbisara and Queen Vaidehi are visited by a soothsayer, or visited by a visionary. And this visionary tells them that, ooh, your son's going to do some pretty bad things, and I don't think that that's a good thing. And there's a couple of ways that this story goes. One part of the story is that King Bimbisara actually slays this soothsayer, or this old person, and then the old person, or the soothsayer, kind of vows vengeance on King Bimbisara. Says, I'm going to come back as your son, and I'm going to do some bad things to you. So because of this vision, King Bimbisara and Queen Vaidehi, in a moment of blind passion or blind fear, when their baby son Ajatasatru is born, they throw him out the window. But luckily, a tree catches Ajatasatru, and the only thing that Ajatasatru encounters is a broken thumb. So years later, when Ajatasatru is a very young, strapping man and handsome prince, he has a particularly sneaky advisor. Okay, now we're adding another character to the story. This sneaky advisor is Devadatta, who is the cousin of Shakyamuni Buddha. For those of you who do not remember, Devadatta kind of plays the evil person in these stories. So Devadatta whispers in Ajatasatru's ear. Now, we're not exactly sure what he whispers, but one of the things that he does whisper is he whispers the story about how King Bimbisara and Queen Vaidehi actually tried to kill him as a little infant. So now they're actually cast doubt upon the story. Is this story true? Did this really happen? Or is this Devadatta's way of just trying to convince Ajatasatru to overthrow his father, usurp the kingdom? Well, whether the story was true or not, Ajatasatru does this. So Ajatasatru actually does overthrow his father. He gets enough political support, and he ousts his father from the throne. So the king has been dethroned by his own son. Now, this is nothing new in history. If you read any history books, or if you look at European history and Asian history, there are all these stories about how these sons conspire to overthrow their father. But already, in this story, Ajatasatru is painted as this evil being, right? Is painted as this, evil, conniving, and cunning prince who is obsessed with power. So this happens, and he imprisons his father, and he is about to, he's not allowing his father any food or any type of nourishment. So, but he does allow, the one thing he does allow is he allows his mother, Queen Vaidehi, to visit King Bimbisara in his jail cell. And in this story, the queen sneaks Bimbisara food. So she finds all these clever ways to sneak Bimbisara all this food. And Ajatasatru is wondering, why can't why is my father not dead yet? Why is he still alive? And then finally he finds out, or one of the guards tells him, I think that the queen has been sneaking your father food. So this really upsets Ajatasattu, and he takes out a sword and he's about to strike his mother. But then his two loyal advisors actually stop him. And they say, okay, Ajatasattu, we can stomach you taking over the kingdom and even betraying your own father, because that's how things have been done. We're totally used to it. We're numb to that. However, there has been no instance where a king or a prince who has done this has killed his own mother. If you kill your own mother, we're done. We're going to leave you, and we're going to convince people to stop following you. So you can't do that. So Ajatasattu finally says, okay, and he just imprisons his mother. And then in that time, the mother implores to the Buddha, what did I do? Or what can I do? And then the Buddha comes and then delivers to Queen Vaidehi the meditation method of envisioning Amida Buddha as a means for salvation. So that's the Contemplation Sutra. But then there's a second part to this story as well, and that comes in the form of the Nirvana Sutra. So that is the Gosandai that I quoted from today, from Shinran's Kyogyo Shinsho. He quotes the Nirvana Sutra heavily. And the reason is because this second part of the story, Prince Ajatasattu is now a full-grown adult. He's been king for a while, probably sort of a dictator, and he's been really mean. And so in this time, he starts to get really sick. The prince starts to become really sick. His skin is starting to look really gross, and he's starting to really smell bad and all these terrible things. And then he gets all these advisors. He gets like all of those self-help gurus to come out to him. And then what ends up happening is they kind of try to rationalize with him. And one of the symbolisms behind all of this terrible things happening to him is his guilt. He's very guilty about what he's done to his father. He's very guilty about what he's done to his mother. He has done all these terrible things, and finally all that guilt and all that shame is starting to catch up with him. But all these 6 advisors who come to try and reason with him say, it's not that big of a deal. Again, you just are doing you, and you're not doing anything different than people have done in the past. So don't feel too bad about it. But none of this works. So finally, his last advisor, Jivaka, tells him, you've done a lot of terrible things, and it's time for you to go see the Buddha. And then on his bed, I think that Ajatasattu is feeling like death about now. He hears this voice. He hears this really faint voice that's saying, yeah, you better do that. You better do that. And he goes, who is that? Who is that? Who is this voice? And he says, great king, it is your father, Bimbisara. Let Jivaka's advice be heeded. Do not follow the words of the 6 ministers. Their views are wrong. So there is a context to that quote, okay? That he listened to all these ministers and they were trying to rationalize all the terrible things that Ajatasattu did, but it was his father's voice. Jivaka, of course, initiated it, but his father was the one who finally convinced Ajatasattu, you got to go see the Buddha. If you want to fix this problem of yours, you need to go see the Buddha. Now, isn't that interesting? So Bimbisara in the Contemplation Sutra passes away. And yet, in this next part of the story, the Nirvana Sutra, he comes back and tells his son, you got to go see the Buddha. Because even in death, and even outside of this physical world, the father still cares for his son's well-being. He still cares that his son gets well. He still wants his son's redemption. There's all of these, it's so interesting because, when we think about it, we would think, oh, how could you, right? How dare you? I can't stand it. But, we think that that's how the father would think. Like, I don't want anything to do with you. And yet, even after all of these atrocious, terrible things that Ajatasattu did to his father, the father still comes back and says, I want you to go see the Buddha. You must go see the Buddha. This is a really good story that illustrates, I think, in some ways, a father's love. because our Father's love is really great. Now, of course, we have, as sons and daughters, or as children to their parents, sometimes we have very complicated relationships with our parents. I can't paint this rosy picture all the time and say, oh, yes, you have this great relationship with your father, or, oh, father's love is always good for you. Sometimes there are bad fathers out there. And yet, we also need to recognize as well that for the fathers who are good fathers, but for any fathers, they brought us into this world. And then, particularly in a Buddhist context, okay, in Buddhism, our fathers play a key part because, like our mothers, especially with our mothers, our fathers also played a key part in bringing us into this world. And in Buddhism, they give us, because we are alive, we were given the right circumstances to hear the teachings of the Buddha. When you hear Shinran quote from the sutras a lot, and when you hear Shinran talk about Amida Buddha, or the two bodhisattvas, Kannon and Seishi Bosatsu, he sort of addresses them like they're a compassionate father and mother, right? Two loving parents guiding us through life. Two loving parents trying to teach us the ways of the Dharma. And in a small sense, that is what fathers do as well. So to give another example, to give a last example, I can talk a little bit about my father. My father still never stops treating me like I'm his little boy. I'm sorry. It's still it's kind of funny to say now, but in the moment of it, it's very annoying. It's very, very annoying. And I'm on the phone with him. I call my father or my parents every week. My father, right, and particularly, is always still nagging me to do things. Did you remember to do this? Did you remember to pay your taxes? Do you remember to do this? Did you remember to do you remember to take out the garbage? Right? And then I'm just like, Dad, I'm an adult now. I'm 32. I'm 32, Dad. You don't have to keep telling me this. But for my father, I will never stop being his little boy or his teenage son where he's always nagging to do stuff. And as annoying as it is, I've been talking to some other people and they say, you should be grateful that your father still takes an interest in what you do. You should be grateful that your father is still around and is still telling you to do things and still shows his love in that way. Now, obviously, my father is a Sansei Nikkei or a Japanese American father, so he doesn't show his affections in the traditional way. He doesn't give me hugs. I like to give my father hugs now. I like to hug him and give him a big squeeze because I know he hates that. He doesn't like physical affection that way. He shows his affection by nagging me. He shows his affection by bossing me around and telling me what to do. And I remember I was at an event not too long ago, and I saw this other young man, and of course I'm keeping the names secret, so I don't out anybody. But his father was also present at this event, and he was also nagging his son. And the son was about in his early 20s, and the father's nagging was like, "Hey, did you remember to hand sanitize your hands? Did you remember to do all this? Did you remember to do all that?" Right? And so I hear this a lot. The nagging of a father. It's like, Dad, give me a break. And I can only laugh. And I talked to the father afterwards, and I said, you sound just like my dad. You sound just like me. And then if I ever have kids someday, if I ever have a son or a daughter, I wonder how I'm going to be. Am I going to be nagging them all the time? Am I going to be bossing them around? Probably. And so with this story in mind, even though I probably in many ways acted like an ungrateful son, I definitely didn't do to the extent of what Ajatashatru did to his own father. I didn't usurp the throne and overtake him. But sometimes I didn't act like a very good son. Sometimes I was very ungrateful. I complained. I backtalked to my father. I kind of still do sometimes. Right? There were definitely times I did not show him the respect that he deserved. There were times I lost my patience and I lost my temper with him. There were times that I didn't want to even be associated with him, or I wanted him to just leave me alone. right? Go away. Let me live my life, Dad. And yet, even after all of that time, still today, my father calls me and loves me enough to nag me. And I'm really trying hard. I'm really trying hard to view it this way, but he still loves me enough to nag me on a weekly basis about things. You should do this. You should do that. Your Dharma talk should be lighter. All of these things. So with that in mind, I would like to thank all of you for attending today's Dharma service. And I want to once again wish all the fathers out there a happy Father's Day. I think that it's really important that our Dharma school kids really appreciate the efforts and the workings of their fathers. Yes, not all fathers yes, it's true. Not all fathers are good fathers. And there are times that we have very difficult relationships with our fathers, or sometimes our father's not in our lives at all. But for the Dharma school students who are here at the Tacoma Buddhist Temple, I really want you to thank your fathers because they're still playing a very key, important part in your life. And especially you're here at the temple now, largely also because of your father. So with that in mind, I would like to thank you all again for attending. And please start to stay cool out there. It's starting to warm up. And please continue to try practicing safety measures as much as possible. Lots of things are opening up and we're able to start doing more things. But let's all continue to try and keep that mindset of interdependence. Because, this pandemic has given us a hard lesson in that. So thank you very much. And please join me in Gasho. And say the Nembutsu with me. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Nam Mandats. Nam Mandats. Nam Mandats.